This week we're going to discuss depressants and inhalants. So there's different types of depressants other than alcohol and opiates, which we've already discussed. So there's sedative hypnotics, anti-anxiety drugs, and inhalants. So barbiturates, it does not produce behavioral change when on its own. Another chemical needs to be added for the depressant effects. So this was found by the chemist, I think he's a chemist, Adolf von Baeyer. He first found the barbiturate in 1903, and he was able to figure this out. So barbiturates are categorized as long-acting, 6+ hours, intermediate acting, 4 to 6 hours, short acting, less than 4, and then ultra short, so within seconds. So these are generally used for surgeries, and they're not commonly abused medications. All injectable barbiturates are shorter acting than orally administered drugs, so they're quick to act and don't last long. So some acute effects. So depending on the dose, it would start by relieving anxiety, some disinhibition, sedation, sleep, all the way, and would continue to depress the respiratory system and all the other systems, and could result in death, depending on how much you take. So some other effects. So because they're all depressants, they're all similar to alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant, so it can impair your driving. It suppresses REM sleep, which when you have a sleep rebound, it can actually cause vivid, upsetting nightmares. You can have a barbiturate hangover, so you can actually have a withdrawal from it, similar to alcohol. Can be a lethal overdose, so too high a dose or combined with alcohol, and generally it can be used as an attempt of suicide by combining different depressants like that. So some chronic effects, if you're taking it often, can develop a tolerance and can lead to dependence, which unfortunately can increase anxiety during the day and worsen insomnia. Some withdrawal symptoms that are similar to chronic alcohol abuse. So somebody who's been using alcohol for a long time, it's similar to somebody who's used barbiturates for a long time. So because of all of these unfortunate aspects of these drugs, new drugs were created that can have similar positive effects, but fewer of the bad effects. But unfortunately, when they were created, so non-barbiturate sedative hypnotics, they didn't really help. Chloral hydrate was developed in 1832, but you wondered, it was actually making people unconscious. And then Quaaludes in 1965, a sleeping pill. There was a high abuse rate, and there was a thought to have aphrodisiac properties to this medication. And then in 1955 started coming out with some anti-anxiety drugs. Probamate was the first anti-anxiety drug, but it had pretty unfortunate side effects and had a abuse potential. People could abuse it. So then benzodiazepines, things like Librium, Valium, started to come out in the 1960s. They were longer acting, so helping with anxiety, but there were some faster acting problems that could help with agitation, delirium tremens. So somebody who's coming down from alcohol withdrawal, a pretty severe alcohol abuse, can have something called delirium tremens, and it can help with as an anticonvulsant, and it can also help with sleep. So somebody who takes a benzodiazepine can help with sleep. So here are various types of benzodiazepines, categorized by how quickly they act on the body, and how long they last in the system in hours. So benzodiazepines, they're the acute effects, so the quick, immediate effects. So it has a slow absorption, so it goes, relaxation is gradual, it lasts longer, so it's kind of takes a while. It's pretty rare to die from benzodiazepines, but you should never mix them with alcohol or other depressants. Chronic effects are more long-term, so there's a tolerance to the set of effects. So when you take it for insomnia specifically, eventually it will stop you. It will stop helping with going to sleep, but if you're taking it for an anxiety, it'll probably continue to help with the anxiety. Withdrawal can take days to show, so they stay in their body for a long time, so it may take days before you start to notice that your anxiety is getting worse, you're having problems with sleeping again, some agitation. So benzodiazepines on the brain, so it affects the GABA neurotransmitter, so it's greater inhibition and decreased activity of that neuron. Misuse and abuse, so it's not really abused for their effects. It doesn't really cause a high, so it doesn't really work that way. But there could be some polydrug abuse. So, for example, somebody who drinks alcohol might use benzodiazepines at work. So there's no, it's a cross tolerance. So they have the same effects on the body, but you wouldn't be able to smell the benzodiazepines like you would the alcohol. Somebody who takes heroin or cocaine may take the benzo to decrease anxiety when the high is decreasing. So when you're coming off the heroin or cocaine, they would feel some anxiety as a withdrawal, and the benzodiazepine would actually help with that. So some non-benzodiazepine depressants, so things that treat sleep disorders and anxiety, so things like Ambien or Lunesta, these help with short-term insomnia, so if somebody who's having a hard time, they might need something to help immediately with some sleep problems, not to be taken for a long period of time. Some other ones help with anxiety, but they don't have cross-tolerance with alcohol because it's not a benzodiazepine. The buspirone is not a benzo, so it's has no withdrawal like alcohol would. Beta blockers, so they can slow heart rate, relax blood vessels. It's meant to control blood pressure, but also it's been used for anxiety. And then other antidepressants. So GHB was considered a steroid enhancing and growth hormone enhancing. It is generally used as a club drug now, feeling out of body high, lowered inhibitions. It can lead to unconsciousness and amnesia, so again why it would be potentially used as a rape drug, because if somebody can't remember what's happening. It is colorless, odorless, and virtually tasteless, so if it's put in an alcoholic beverage you would probably not know it's there, so very dangerous. So we'll go into more inhalants now, so more huffing. So these have been used for centuries, so using nitrous oxide as early as the 1800s, so looking at laughing gases, used as non-alcoholic drunkenness, but then they realized that could be used as an anesthetic and dentists were able to use it. Now they use nitrous oxide, its slang is called whippets. It's in whipped cream dispensers, so that's what kind of sprays out the whipped cream when you inhale it. So with mild euphoric high, greater feeling of well-being, sometimes loss of consciousness because it actually is blocking oxygen to the brain, sensory distortions, nausea, vomiting, and can cause brain damage because if you're suffocating the brain of oxygen, then you can have brain damage. So abuse potential for inhalants. So it is a faster intoxication. It does, the high is very quick. Hangovers are less unpleasant than alcohol. It's not like as bad. It's easy to carry around and hide. You can just, it doesn't look like you're carrying a drug if you're just carrying a can of whipped cream. And it's easily available. You can go to any grocery store or department store and buy these types of things. So some acute effects, so quick onset. So it is a depressant drug, so it actually slows the brain waves. You feel intoxicated, you might feel giddy or euphoric, dizziness because of the lack of oxygen to the brain, and slurred speech, so it's very similar to alcohol that way. Lasts up to 45 minutes, but then 2 hours of drowsiness or loss of consciousness. So occasionally you might have double vision, ringing in the ears, and hallucinations as well. So some serious dangers of inhalant use. So obvious health problems. You could die very, very suddenly. It could completely block off all oxygen to the brain. Behavioral effects, feeling reckless and omnipotent, meaning you can do anything. So you might feel like you can fly, might jump off a building, and obviously that would cause a very sudden death. Hallucinations. So administration, so actually the hazards of taking it. So hypoxia and asphyxiation, so not being able to breathe. You might vomit, choke on the vomits, and freezing the throat. So people who inhale things like nitrous oxide or other inhalants could actually freeze the throat when inhaling it. So some patterns of abuse. It's the fourth highest in experimentation, next to alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. It's the only substance that use in younger grades is higher than older grades because of how easy it is to get a hold of. Use is overrepresented in those who are poor and those youth with emotional and mental health problems. So they're more likely, unfortunately, to use this type of substance. Young inhalant users are more likely to have a higher delinquency, so getting in trouble with the law, poor school performance, emotional difficulties, and parents who are substance users. Depends potential. So long-term effects aren't really known because use only lasts about 1 to 2 years, or it's sporadic, so it's not as chronic a use. Some cases of tolerance to glue and gasoline, so there has been, you need to sniff or huff more glue or gasoline to get the same effects. And a dependence occurs, so feeling restless, irritable, and anxious when not using the drug, so feeling like you are psychologically craving the drug. And there's my reference for this PowerPoint.